In the middle of the western Pacific, a series of artificial islets rise from the turquoise waters of Pohnpei, a land covered with lush jungle and jagged mountains. These islets form a city so extraordinary that for centuries, its existence baffled explorers, archaeologists, and historians alike. This is Nan Madol, often called the Venice of the Pacific, the lost city of Atlantis, a place where human ambition, ingenuity, and mystery converge in a labyrinth of stone canals, towering basalt walls, and ancient temples. Nan Madol was not built by chance. For hundreds of years, it served as the political and religious heart of the Saudeleur Dynasty, the first known rulers to unify Pohnpei. Its location, atop a reef and straddling a coastline of lagoons, was both strategic and symbolic, reflecting a mastery of the natural environment and a desire to dominate both land and water. The scale of construction is staggering. Archaeologists have identified more than 90 islets, covering an area of roughly 200 acres, built entirely from basalt stones, some weighing as much as 50 tons. Each stone was carefully placed to create walls, tombs, and structures that would endure centuries of tropical storms, shifting tides, and earthquakes. How these stones were quarried, transported, and assembled remains one of the greatest engineering mysteries of the ancient world. Legends tell of Olisipa and Olosopa, two brothers who arrived from a distant eastern land, wielding magic to move the stones across the sea. Some versions speak of dragons, chants, or divine assistance, suggesting that the people themselves regarded the construction as impossible without supernatural help. Yet the myths may reflect memory of a lost technology, a system of organization and ingenuity now invisible to us. Archaeological evidence shows that construction began around 1200 CE and continued for centuries, reaching its peak under the Saudeleur rulers. These kings and chiefs established Nan Madol as the ceremonial, administrative, and religious center of Pohnpei. The city was divided into zones. Some islets were royal residences, others were temples for priests, some were homes for commoners or warriors, and several served as tombs for the ruling elite. The most sacred areas were heavily fortified, with walls over 25 feet tall, forming a fortress of stone that continues to defy the imagination. Every islet had a purpose, reflecting the rigid hierarchy of Saudeleur society. Nobles occupied central locations with access to the canals and ceremonial spaces, while commoners remained at the periphery, performing labor, farming, or attending religious duties. The canals themselves were more than waterways. They were streets, moats, and symbolic separators between social classes, reflecting a society deeply conscious of order and authority. The Saudeleur Dynasty demanded absolute obedience. Tribute flowed from villages across the island, ensuring a constant supply of food, labor, and resources to sustain the city. Commoners were required to perform heavy labor, transporting basalt columns, raising walls, and maintaining the canals. Failure or defiance was met with harsh punishment, reinforcing the power of the rulers and instilling fear across the population. Yet within this control lay brilliance. Nan Madol demonstrates not only authority but innovation. The builders mastered hydrology, controlling tides and drainage to protect their islets from flooding. Basalt columns were quarried several miles away, transported on rafts or possibly rolled on logs, and positioned with such precision that the walls remain intact after centuries of exposure to the elements. No written records remain, yet the architecture itself speaks volumes about planning, coordination, and technological expertise. The city was a hub of ceremonial life. Priests performed sacred rituals in temples, invoking the gods for fertility, harvest, and protection. Tombs were constructed with extraordinary care, housing the remains of kings and nobles with offerings, ceremonial objects, and carved stone markers. Each ritual and architectural choice reinforced the divine right of the Saudeleur rulers, maintaining the illusion of power and stability through the deliberate manipulation of space and symbolism. Yet beneath the grandeur of Nan Madol, discontent simmered. The Saudeleur rulers, initially revered, gradually became tyrannical. They demanded excessive tribute, imposed oppressive labor, and maintained social hierarchies enforced by fear. Legends say that the people prayed for a savior, someone capable of challenging the dynasty and restoring balance to the island. This figure came in the form of Isokalekal, a warrior who arrived from the east said to possess divine blood. Leading a rebellion against the Saudeleur rulers, He capitalized on growing resentment, eventually overthrowing the dynasty and ending centuries of centralized authority. After Isokelekel's conquest, Nan Madol gradually declined. The city lost its purpose as a royal and religious center. Canals fell into disrepair, walls eroded, and the jungle reclaimed much of the islets. Yet the stones endured, a haunting reminder of human ambition, ingenuity, and the impermanence of power. Western explorers first documented Nan Madol in the early 19th century, but its scale continued to astonish archaeologists throughout the 20th century. Researchers marveled at the massive basalt stones, the precision of placement, and the ingenuity of building a city entirely on artificial islets, without draft animals, metal tools, or modern machinery. The mystery of construction techniques remains unsolved, inspiring theories ranging from simple mechanical ingenuity to more speculative claims of lost knowledge or technology. The city's construction was not merely functional, but symbolic. Each islet, wall, and canal reflected the social, religious, and political structure of the Saudeleur era. Burial practices, placement of ceremonial sites, and alignment of the canals reveal a deep understanding of space, cosmology, and hierarchy. The builders integrated their knowledge of tides, coral reef stability, and basalt properties to create a city that could endure natural forces while asserting human dominance over the environment. Trade and sustenance were vital to Nan Madol. The Saudeleur rulers relied on the surrounding island and ocean resources. Fishing, aquaculture, and agriculture supplied food, while skilled artisans produced tools, pottery, and religious artifacts. Trade with neighboring islands brought in rare items, reinforcing the city's status as a regional power center. The combination of labor organization, resource management, and ceremonial importance illustrates a civilization that, while isolated, had mastered the art of urban planning in a challenging environment. The stones themselves remain an enduring mystery. Basalt columns, sometimes weighing tens of tons, were quarried miles away and transported across reefs, requiring coordination, manpower, and ingenuity. Modern experiments suggest rafts, rollers, and human labor were sufficient, yet the precision placement of walls, tombs, and temples implies a level of engineering knowledge that continues to impress. The absence of metal tools or draft animals adds to the puzzle, highlighting the extraordinary capability of the human mind and organization in pre-modern societies. Nan Madol is also a story of resilience and adaptation. For centuries it resisted storms, tides, and seismic activity. Its canals, though partially silted, continue to channel water, and many walls remain standing despite centuries of exposure. The city's endurance demonstrates a profound understanding of engineering, geography, and the natural forces that shape islands in the Pacific. The mysteries of Nan Madol extend beyond construction. Who exactly were the builders, and how did their knowledge spread across the region? How did they organize labor, enforce hierarchy, and maintain control over resources and population? Archaeology provides hints: tools, pottery, skeletal remains, but much remains unknown. Oral traditions, myth, and legend fill the gaps, blurring the line between history and myth, reality and imagination. Modern scientists have begun employing technology to uncover new insights. LiDAR, ground-penetrating radar, and aerial imaging reveal previously hidden structures, canals, and foundations. These discoveries suggest Nan Madol was even more extensive than previously thought, with hundreds of interconnected islets forming a city whose scale rivals ancient urban centers anywhere in the world. Each revelation underscores the ingenuity and determination of its builders, challenging assumptions about isolated Pacific civilizations. The society and daily life of Nan Madol in Nan Madol was shaped by hierarchy, ritual, and the rhythms of the ocean. The city's central islets were reserved for the Saudeleur kings and their closest advisors, living in stone palaces surrounded by canals that functioned as both roads and barriers. Every aspect of urban design reinforced authority. The closer one lived to the center, the higher one's status. The outer islets housed laborers, artisans, and fishermen, whose work sustained the elite and the city itself. The Saudeleur rulers claimed divine authority. Priests performed ceremonies to maintain favor with the gods, invoking blessings for harvests, fishing, and protection from storms. Temples were constructed with immense care, their walls precisely aligned with the sun and stars, suggesting knowledge of astronomy and its importance in ritual life. These ceremonies reinforced the ruler's power, creating a society in which religious observance and political control were inseparable. Laborers moved massive basalt stones using techniques still debated today. Oral tradition speaks of chants and ritualized work, implying that construction itself was a spiritual practice, blending human effort with the sacred. Men worked in teams, dragging stones over log rollers or possibly floating them on rafts along tidal channels. Archaeologists estimate that thousands of laborers participated over centuries, building walls, temples, and tombs that required extraordinary planning and coordination. Daily life in Nan Madol was both structured and labor-intensive. Commoners tended crops, fished in the lagoons, and maintained the intricate canal system. Artisans crafted pottery, carved ceremonial objects, and repaired structures. Food was central to social and religious life, and the city relied on a combination of agriculture, fishing, and trade with surrounding islands. The canals themselves were also used to transport goods, allowing canoes to navigate between islets efficiently, a crucial feature given the weight of the basalt stones and the need for organized labor. The Saudeleur Dynasty imposed strict rules to maintain control. Tribute was collected from every village on Pohnpei, and failure to comply could result in punishment. The ruler's authority was absolute, enforced not only through physical power but also through the perception of divine favor. This combination of coercion and belief created a stable but fragile system, in which the removal of the ruler could rapidly disrupt social order. Within this rigid hierarchy, religion permeated all aspects of life. Priests served as advisors, intermediaries with the divine, and overseers of construction projects. Sacred rituals often involved offerings, ceremonial feasts, and processions along the canals. The tombs of rulers were meticulously constructed, with stone walls forming chambers that would resist time and tide. These tombs were not only physical structures but symbols of eternal authority, linking the king to the spiritual world and reinforcing the societal order. The isolation of Pohnpei may have contributed to the city's extraordinary development. Cut off from large continents, the inhabitants relied on ingenuity, oral knowledge, and local resources. Basalt, coral, wood, and shell were the primary materials, yet the builders achieved engineering feats that rivaled ancient civilizations elsewhere. Each islet's placement and construction reflected understanding of tides, wave patterns, and soil stability, showing a sophisticated interaction with the environment that was both practical and symbolic. Conflict was inevitable. The Saudeleurs' tyranny grew over centuries, provoking resentment among commoners and neighboring clans. Oral histories tell of oppressive labor, excessive tribute, and a ruling class disconnected from the people. This resentment culminated in the arrival of Isokalekal, a warrior with divine lineage who challenged the dynasty. Leading a coalition of rebels, he defeated the Saudeleur rulers, marking the end of centralized authority and initiating a new era on Pohnpei. After the fall of the Saudeleur, Nan Madol gradually fell into decline. The temples were abandoned, the canals silted up, and the walls were overtaken by mangroves and jungle. The city, once a hub of political and religious power, became a ghostly monument. Yet its construction endured, a testament to the knowledge, coordination, and vision of its builders. European explorers arrived centuries later, encountering ruins that seemed almost impossible. The size of the basalt columns, the precision of their placement, and the complexity of the islets suggested a civilization of extraordinary capability. Scholars and archaeologists continue to debate construction methods. Some propose sophisticated mechanical systems, while others suggest ingenuity combined with human labor and organization. Regardless of method, the city demonstrates that isolated societies could achieve monumental engineering feats long before the arrival of modern tools. Nan Madol's canals continue to inspire awe. They allowed transportation, communication, and ceremonial movement across the city. Even partially silted and overgrown, the waterways reflect a level of planning that integrates geography, hydrology, and urban design. Archaeologists studying the city have noted the subtle ways in which the builders adapted the natural reef to create stable foundations for the islets, balancing the forces of ocean and tide with human needs. Trade and exchange were vital. While Pohnpei's isolation limited large-scale interaction, the Saudeleur rulers maintained connections with nearby islands. Canoes carried goods, food, and cultural artifacts, establishing networks of influence that extended the dynasty's reach. These interactions also allowed the diffusion of knowledge, including construction techniques, ritual practices, and governance models. Even as Nan Madol declined, its legacy persisted. Oral traditions preserved stories of the Saudeleur kings, the construction of the city, and the arrival of Isukelical. These narratives kept alive the memory of a civilization that had mastered stone, water, and social organization, blending history with myth in ways that continue to captivate scholars and storytellers alike. Engineering the impossible. How Nan Madol was built. To understand the mystery of Nan Madol, one must begin with its foundation. The builders faced an environment that was both hostile and dynamic. The eastern shore of Pohnpei is fringed with coral reefs and tidal flats, where the sea surges unpredictably. Yet here they chose to build an entire city, a decision that defies logic until one realizes the brilliance of their plan. The reef provided stability, coral offered natural drainage, and the tides could be harnessed to create canals that kept the islets separated and the water flowing. Each islet began as a platform of coral boulders, layered carefully to form a foundation strong enough to support stone structures. Over these coral bases, the builders stacked prismatic basalt columns, creating walls that still stand centuries later. The basalt came from quarries several miles inland, where cooling lava flows had naturally formed the distinctive columnar shapes. Moving these stones, some weighing more than 50 tons, required coordination and strength on an unimaginable scale. Archaeologists believe that the builders used a combination of wooden rollers, palm fiber ropes, and rafts. Basalt logs served as rollers, while the stones were dragged by large teams of workers along prepared paths. When the terrain became too steep or muddy, the stones may have been floated across waterways during high tide. The precision with which these massive blocks were placed indicates deep knowledge of leverage, balance, and teamwork. There were no draft animals, no metal tools, and no written plans, only oral instructions, passed down through generations. Local oral traditions, however, tell a different story. According to legend, the stones were flown through the air by magic. The two brothers who founded Nan Madol, Olisipa and Olosopa, were said to have used chance and supernatural powers to lift the stones, guided by the will of the gods. While this myth likely symbolizes human ingenuity elevated to divine status, it reflects how the people themselves viewed the city, as a place beyond ordinary human capacity. The construction techniques used in Nan Madol demonstrate remarkable adaptability. The basalt columns were arranged horizontally and vertically in interlocking patterns, creating stable walls that could flex slightly during earthquakes without collapsing. The walls of the royal tomb at Nandawas, for example, rise 25 feet high, their corners meticulously aligned to form a near-perfect rectangle. The chambers within were constructed with corbelled roofs, designed to distribute weight evenly, ensuring long-term stability. Each islet was assigned a specific function. Some served as temples, others as residences, storage areas, or burial grounds. The layout suggests a deliberate attempt to organize society spatially, reinforcing the power of the Saudeleur Dynasty. The royal islets were surrounded by canals that acted as both defenses and ceremonial avenues. High-ranking priests and nobles traveled by canoe between temples and audience halls, their movements reflecting the flow of ritual and governance. The choice of materials was both practical and symbolic. Basalt, dark and heavy, represented permanence and strength. Coral, white and porous, symbolized purity and the connection to the sea. The interplay of these elements gave Nan Madol a dual identity, part fortress, part temple, both rooted in earth and open to the ocean. This integration of material, environment, and belief created a city that embodied the Saudeleur's control over both nature and people. Building such a city required not only technical skill, but also a massive labor force. The Saudeleur rulers commanded thousands of subjects, organizing them into work groups tasked with quarrying, transporting, and assembling the basalt columns. Food production had to increase to sustain these workers, leading to the expansion of agriculture on the main island. The entire society revolved around the maintenance of Nan Madol, transforming the island into a highly organized state centered on divine kingship. Archaeological surveys suggest that construction continued over centuries, with new islets added and older ones rebuilt or repurposed. This continuity implies a sustained system of governance, capable of directing large-scale projects across generations. It also suggests a belief that the city itself was alive, a sacred organism that needed constant care, expansion, and renewal. Despite the apparent stability, the physical demands of maintaining Nan Madol were immense. The basalt walls required constant reinforcement against erosion and tides. The canals needed dredging to remain navigable. As resources were exhausted and labor grew scarce, the city's upkeep may have become unsustainable. When the Saudeleur Dynasty fell, the system collapsed and the city's structures began to decay. Modern archaeological methods have revealed layers of occupation beneath the visible ruins. Excavations show evidence of earlier, smaller settlements that predate the Saudeleur era by centuries. These findings suggest that the concept of building on the reef evolved gradually, with techniques refined over generations until they culminated in the grandeur of Nan Madol. Such continuity of experimentation and innovation is a hallmark of human civilization, proving that the people of Pohnpei were not passive recipients of myth, but active engineers shaping their world. The environmental context of Nan Madol also played a crucial role. Pohnpei is one of the wettest places on Earth, with constant rainfall feeding lush forests and rivers. The builders understood how to manage this abundance. They positioned the islets to channel rainwater into the canals, preventing flooding and maintaining balance between fresh and salt water. The city's alignment to prevailing winds and tidal flows minimized erosion, allowing the structures to endure centuries of storms. The engineering of Nan Madol cannot be understood in isolation from its social and spiritual dimensions. Construction was as much an act of devotion as it was a technical achievement. Each stone carried symbolic meaning, each wall a reflection of divine order. The process of building united the people in service to their rulers and gods, transforming the landscape into a physical manifestation of faith and hierarchy. When viewed through this lens, the legend of flying stones may not be as fantastical as it seems. It represents the elevation of human effort to the level of miracle. To move stones weighing tens of tons without machines required organization, strength, and belief. The people of Pohnpei achieved the impossible because their society demanded it, and their gods, embodied in their rulers, commanded it. Modern technology continues to uncover the secrets of Nan Madol. Using LiDAR and satellite imagery, researchers have identified structures hidden beneath dense vegetation, suggesting that the city once extended farther inland. These findings point to an even more complex urban system, with outer settlements connected to the central islets through networks of canals and pathways. The sheer scale of this infrastructure indicates a population far larger and more sophisticated than previously assumed. The architectural logic of Nan Madol reveals a civilization that understood both its limitations and its possibilities. In a world without iron or wheels, they turned to stone and water. In a land of isolation, they built a city that mirrored the heavens. The basalt towers of Nan Madol stand as a silent challenge to assumptions about what so-called primitive societies could achieve. Their builders were not mystics lost to time, but engineers, planners, and visionaries whose legacy survives in stone and tide. Even today, the site remains an engineering puzzle. Attempts to replicate the construction methods using traditional tools have met with limited success. The sheer weight of the stones and the difficulty of maneuvering them over uneven terrain test the limits of human endurance. Some experiments suggest that the basalt columns could have been rolled using ropes and logs soaked in water to reduce friction, while others propose that stones were slid along greased pathways of palm oil or clay. None of these explanations fully account for the precision and scale of the structures. Nan Madol's construction reflects a dialogue between humans and their environment. Rather than conquering nature, the builders worked with it, using tides, coral, and stone to create a city that floated on the sea, yet remained firmly rooted in the earth. The result was a masterpiece of harmony and resilience, blending architecture and landscape into a single, living entity. The enduring mystery of Nan Madol lies not in its impossibility but in its testimony to human will. Across cultures and eras, people have built monuments that seem to defy reason. Pyramids, temples, megaliths. Nan Madol belongs to this lineage, a reminder that greatness can arise in the most remote corners of the world when necessity, faith, and imagination converge. The fall of the Saudeleur Dynasty. Rebellion, curse, and abandonment. By the time Nan Madol reached its peak, the Saudeleur Dynasty ruled over Pohnpei with absolute authority. For nearly 1,000 years, their reign defined the island's political and spiritual life. Yet absolute power carries a hidden cost. The same divine authority that had bound people to the city eventually became the force that tore it apart. At first, the Saudeleur kings were seen as semi-divine, chosen by the gods to maintain harmony between the heavens and the earth. Their rule was centralized, and Nan Madol stood as the beating heart of their empire. Every offering, every harvest, and every ceremony revolved around the royal compound. The rulers demanded tribute from every clan: breadfruit, yams, fish, and even workers for the never-ending construction projects. Over time, the demands grew heavier, and reverence gave way to resentment. Stories say that later Saudeleur rulers grew cruel and arrogant. They interfered with the islanders' ancestral religions, forcing them to worship new idols and to bring offerings directly to the rulers. The dynasty's final king, a man named Saudeleur, is often portrayed as the embodiment of tyranny. He demanded the impossible from his subjects, including tributes that drained villages of food and labor. One legend tells that Saudemeur's cruelty reached a point where he ordered every family to keep their cooking fires burning day and night so that his inspectors could see smoke rising from every house, a symbol of constant production and submission. Those who failed were punished. Others were executed for questioning his decrees. Such excess shattered the bond between ruler and people that had sustained the dynasty for generations. The downfall began not through an army from outside, but from whispers within. Discontent spread among the clans who had once pledged loyalty. The Saudeleur system, so dependent on obedience and fear, began to crumble. The canals that once carried priests and nobles in ceremony now carried rumors of rebellion. Then came Isokelekel. According to Pohnpeian tradition, Isokelekel was a demigod or warrior chief who arrived from the mythical land of Katao. He was said to be the son of the thunder god Nan Madol, born to avenge the insult the Saudeleur had dealt to the gods. Whether he was a real historical leader or a mythic symbol of resistance, his story became inseparable from the fall of Nan Madol. Isokelekel landed on Pohnpei with a band of warriors, carrying divine sanction and a promise of liberation. The local clans, weary of the Saudeleur's oppression, joined him. What followed was both rebellion and holy war, a struggle not only for political control but for the soul of the island. Battles raged across Pohnpei. The Saudeleur's forces, though numerous, were demoralized. The divine aura that had protected the dynasty seemed to fade as the people turned against them. In the final confrontation, Isokelekel's warriors stormed Nan Madol. The great basalt walls that had once symbolized unshakable power became traps, confining the defenders within their own fortress. The legends describe Saudemeur's desperate end. Some say he fled into the jungle, transforming into a fish to escape divine punishment. Others say he drowned in the very canals his ancestors had built, swallowed by the waters that once carried his power. Whatever the truth, his dynasty ended, and with it, the Saudeleur's era. After the victory, Isokelekel established a new political order known as the Nan Madol system, a federation of chiefs that still influences Pohnpei's governance today. Unlike the centralized rule of the Saudeleur, the Nan Madol system distributed power among clans, creating balance and preventing the rise of another absolute monarch. This transformation marked the end of one age and the beginning of another, but Nan Madol's fate was sealed. The new rulers did not continue to live in the city. Some say they feared the spirits of the Saudeleur. Others believed the place had been cursed. The basalt walls that once echoed with chants and drums fell silent. The canals grew choked with silt, the temples overrun by jungle. What was once a living city became a ghostly monument, a reminder of human ambition and divine wrath. In the centuries that followed, Nan Madol passed into legend. Islanders told stories of glowing lights in the ruins at night, of voices whispering from beneath the water, of canoes that drifted into the canals and never returned. Many refused to enter the site after dark, believing that the spirits of the Saudeleur still guarded their broken city. These myths preserved the memory of Nan Madol, even as the jungle reclaimed it. When European explorers arrived in the 19th century, they were astonished to find a vast stone city hidden beneath dense vegetation. The ruins seemed to rise from the sea itself, defying explanation. To the local people, though, it was never lost. It had only been left to sleep. Modern archaeologists believe that the abandonment of Nan Madol was not only due to rebellion, but also environmental strain. The coral foundations had begun to sink. The canals filled with silt and food resources on the small island could no longer sustain a growing elite population. The city had reached its natural limit, and when political will collapsed, nature swiftly reclaimed what humans had built. Still, the legend of Isokalekel endures as a powerful allegory. It represents balance restored, the fall of tyranny and the return of divine justice. In this way, Nan Madol became both a warning and a sacred site, a place that embodied the cycle of rise, dominance, and downfall that defines all human civilizations. For generations, the people of Pohnpei continued to treat Nan Madol with reverence. Chiefs made ceremonial visits to offer respect to the ancestors buried there. Even today, local customs insist that visitors should seek permission before entering the site, acknowledging that it remains under the watch of ancient spirits. When Western explorers and later scientists tried to document Nan Madol, they found that the locals spoke of it in both fear and pride. They described it as the city of ghosts or the city on the reef. It stood as proof that their ancestors were capable of greatness equal to any other ancient civilization on Earth. Yet for centuries, the Western world ignored that message. Early European visitors dismissed Nan Madol as the work of lost white builders, refusing to believe that Pacific Islanders could have engineered such a marvel. It was only in the 20th century that serious archaeological work began to credit the people of Pohnpei for their own heritage. In truth, Nan Madol's story reflects a universal pattern. Great civilizations rise on the strength of faith, unity, and innovation, but when power becomes absolute and detached from the people, decay follows. The fall of the Saudeleur mirrors the downfall of empires from Egypt to Rome, from the Maya to the Aztec. It is a timeless lesson carved in basalt and coral, one that still echoes across the Pacific waves. Even as Nan Madol lay abandoned, it never disappeared. Storm after storm battered its walls, yet the structures endured. The basalt columns, black and unyielding, resisted the passage of centuries. Trees grew from their cracks, vines coiled over roofs once gilded by ritual fires, and crabs scuttled through courtyards where kings once walked. Nature, in reclaiming the city, preserved it. Today, when divers and explorers drift through Nan Madol's flooded corridors, they enter a world suspended between land and sea, life and death. The silence is heavy but not empty. It holds the whispers of generations, the builders who dreamed, the kings who ruled, and the rebels who brought them down. Nan Madol remains, not as a ruin of failure, but as a monument to resilience. Its stones still stand against the tide, a defiant testament that human hands guided by belief and will can shape the impossible.